Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
This is Tina, and this is a story about me and my biological mother. My mother is sitting in the cafe of a garden center, staring at her cup of tea. I'm over the other side of the shop looking at some strawberry preserves. I want to attract her attention, but the word mom sticks in my throat. I use it so infrequently. Instead of calling out, I just walk over and show her the jam. Ever since I left home 15 years ago, the relationship between my mother and me has worsened. In hindsight, it was never very good to start with, but it's taken 15 years of counseling and soul searching to realize that. The fact of it is that my mother and I don't like each other much. We don't hate each other, we're just sort of indifferent. There, I've said it, indifferent. Saying it feels like committing some sort of crime. My mother and I live hundreds of miles apart, and in the case of most of my friends, this should mean that visiting home should be a time of joy and excitement. Instead, they are weekends of tense, polite conversation, both of us desperately searching for something in common to talk about. And that is usually what she's currently watching on television. As a 20 something woman, I'm constantly surrounded by reminders that my mom should be my best friend. Advertising aimed at my demographic features glamorous, youthful mothers going to the salons with their best friend daughters. Because it's all so alien to me, I tend to become a little bit fixated. I tend to look beyond the principal plot lines of films and become obsessed with the parts that involve a mother and a daughter for a large, loving family headed by a quirky matriarch. When the film Mamma Mia came out, I went to see it with a girlfriend for a bit of a laugh. It was mainly about love affairs between Meryl Streep and her exes. As I watched, I was as always bewildered by the apparently natural bond that mothers and daughters have on screen. Another film. It's complicated, again with Meryl Streep, has a plot that hinges on her post-divorce relationship with her ex-husband. But the highlights for me, the way her children clustered around her and the way she reacted when they all came back to visit. Though I know it's not just on screen. My friend Susie has the same exact sort of relationship with her mom. It baffles and fascinates me. They talk every single day, sometimes more often, and tell each other everything. I didn't have an unhappy upbringing. I wasn't a happy child, but that wasn't down to child abuse or neglect. I was well clothed, fed, and I even had ballet lessons. I went to university paid for by my parents, and I knew and I still know that there's always somewhere to stay if I need to. But my mother and I never had the sort of closeness I saw in my friends' relationships. They would go shopping or share secrets. They would tell their moms things about their lives. The one time I tried to ask my mother about her teenage years, she told me to mind my own business. And so I did. I grew up minding my own business and she minded hers. I left home as soon as possible and met my now husband at university, and he quickly stepped into the role of best friend and emotional support giver. I made enduring friendships, most of which I believe to be unconditional. Most of my friends believe me to be a loving and caring individual, and I know I could turn to any one of them in an emergency, and them to me. Yet, I cannot remember the last time my mother and I hugged, even though I hug my friends all the time, and the very thought of it makes me cringe. My mother is the last person I go to in a crisis. She is certainly the last person to whom I would tell a secret or a problem. And if I'm honest, I don't need to anymore, as I have my own friends now. But my lack of a close friendship with her bothers other people a lot. When I say that I don't have a close relationship with her, they ask whether we fight a lot. But no, I don't recall ever having a fight with my mother. That would entail caring enough to bother. I used to go through phases of worrying about it and trying to repair the damage, but all the while I was aware that I was doing it for other people. I visit infrequently, but I visit. I do it not so I can see her, but if I'm honest, so her neighbors and family can see me visiting. A few years ago, before I realized I didn't care anymore, I called her up and asked whether we could sort it out. Her answer told me everything I needed to know. Sort what out? I stopped bothering from that moment on. Now my principal concern is explaining to people why I don't see her that often. And I feel guilty for not really having a good enough reason. My parents weren't divorced. My father died a few years ago. There has been no huge family dispute. There's no big skeleton in anyone's cupboard. Well, not mine anyway. I recently went to see a nurse for a routine appointment, and she asked a host of questions about my mother. Eventually, I had to confess that I didn't know half the answers. She asked whether I could find out. My heart sank as I imagined having to give away a detail of my life, such as why I was going to the nurse, to my own mother. Mother's Day is a nightmare. Trying to find a card that doesn't say my mother is my best friend or the best mother in the world or my heroine is not easy, let me tell you. Others try to fix it for me. Why don't you book a spa weekend for your mom? The very thought of my mother agreeing to or enjoying something like that is just laughable. Or they ask, why don't you go for counseling? This would be all well and good if she would ever condone the idea, but it implies a relationship that needs to be mended. Why does it need to be fixed at all? Were my mother a woman I had met on a train and chatted to for half an hour, she would be one of the last people in the world I would want to talk to for a further half hour. If she wasn't my mother, she would be someone I groaned about having to spend any time with. I simply grew up and discovered that I didn't like my mother as a human being. She's not like me. She's self-obsessed, not interested in others, thoughtless, and incapable of genuine warmth. She has no concept of giving love to receive love, and has never asked me a single meaningful question about my life or career. Some people might feel that I have a duty as a daughter to be there for my mother, that it's down to me to repair our relationship. But because of the way she's raised me, I don't feel there is a relationship to repair. I wish my mother no harm, and if she were in trouble, I would help her like a shot. But I would also be there for any of my neighbors and the old man who swears at people from the bus stop across the road.
If you look around at everything you have, your family, friends, your job, all these things could be considered blessings from God, especially if you are very successful in all aspects of your life. You should be very grateful and appreciate all these gifts, because if you take them for granted and then lose them, you will regret it deeply. Believe me, I know. And my story is how I know. My name is Chris. I am 39 years old and am a news presenter for a local TV channel. I grew up in a poor family. My dad was a low-paid laborer, and I had no desire to follow in his footsteps, so I decided to get a job in life as fast as possible to begin earning money early in life. I first worked as a grocery clerk in sales in a packaging plant. After that, I worked at a lot of different jobs, earning money to support my family and my studies. I earned good grades at my university in the Faculty of Mass Communications, so I would have a chance at getting my dream job of being a news presenter. And I succeeded. In my first job as a news presenter for a local TV channel, it was my duty to prepare programs. Being a news presenter had always been a dream of mine. I was young and wanted to be famous and well known as a TV personality. It was not as easy as I thought it would be, but I was finally able to eventually achieve my dream of becoming a famous news presenter. I was able to move my family into a bigger house. I married a girl whom I loved and with whom I had 2 children. My life was moving along smoothly in accordance with my plans in life. But fate doesn't like happy endings, it seems, and my life took a dark turn. Once I became famous, my work took more and more of my time and energy, and the added stress required to maintain that success at work began taking a toll on my personal life. I began losing interest in my family and started ignoring them, and my friends as well. Spending too much time at work caused me to miss important things in my life, like my kids' and my friends' birthdays, my wedding anniversary, time with my parents, and intimate time with my wife. Ignoring my wife and family caused many domestic arguments. These increased over time and began to affect my work. I even began ignoring mom and dad, causing my relationship with them to worsen as well. Dad blamed me for seeking luxury and fame at the expense of my family. It was hurtful to hear such criticism from Dad. Eventually, he and Mom decided to leave our new flat and return to the old one. My life was being turned upside down. I became so stressed out and irritable that friction with my wife and my kids caused my wife to threaten to leave me and take the kids with her. We ended up quarreling about this even, and I drove them away as well. Fame had improved my life up to a certain point, but was now destroying my life. As I saw it, I had two options: continue down this path and continue destroying my life, or accept that fate had given me a wake-up call, that I need to rethink my life and change course. Also at this time of deep contemplation, I began getting severe headaches, like migraine headaches that worsened day by day. A friend of mine recommended that I go see a doctor, so I took his advice. I went to a doctor who was quite well known, and he told me that I had a tumor in my brain. Woe is me. Was this downhill trend in my life ever going to stop? I guess not, because then he continued with more bad news. That I just had 30 days to live. I didn't know what to do. First, I called Dad. I knew that he was upset with me, as were my friends, wife, and kids. It seemed that I might be doomed to die alone. I began reminiscing about the good old days, when my nice home was filled with happiness and my children laughing, playing, and shouting. But now, it sat silent and empty. Having only 30 days to live, I felt that I needed to fix my life before it was too late. So I took action. I took a vacation from work and went to visit Mom and Dad. After hugging and talking to them, my eyes were filled with tears. Learning what I had given up in pursuit of success tore at my heartstrings. They asked about my health, and I concealed my condition and told them I was quite well. I apologized for my past bad behavior and promised them that I would change for the better. Dad forgave me because he didn't want to see me so sad and miserable, so I was able to reconcile with both of them. Mom asked about my wife and kids, and upon learning that they had left me, she said that I needed to reconcile with them too. I told her that I would do that I planned to fix everything. So I returned to our old home and was putting some flowers on the doorstep when my wife happened to open the door to find me there. I tearfully asked her to forgive me and to move back into our new home to live with me again. I promised them that making them happy would be my only purpose in life from that point forward. The strange thing is that I not only changed for the better, but I was even better than I was before things had gotten worse. I spent all my time with my parents, my family, and my friends. We met every week to gather fun and barbecue cookout parties. During my spiritual renaissance, my renewed enjoyment of life, my phone kept ringing a lot, but I figured it was just the doctor with more bad news, so I ignored it. Then one day, I gathered all the family together and told them the truth. That I was going to die very soon. It was a major shock to everyone. My wife fainted, and my parents and kids were all crying. Finally, I was ready to answer the numerous phone calls that had been coming in. They were from the lab. The lab technician informed me that they had mixed up my medical records with someone else's, and that person had died within the predicted 30 days. However, I was off the hook. They apologized profusely for their mistake and hung up. I was so ecstatic. If there's really a Cloud 9, then I was there. I walked outside and looked up at the clear blue sky with my eyes full of tears, basking in the warmth of the sun and savoring the cool breeze of life teasing at my hair and face. Fate had given me another chance, and I did not intend to waste it the second time around. I would live the rest of my life as if I only had 30 days to live.
Drastic and dire situations create heroes. No one makes history unless their story is inspiring or involves great pain and suffering, overcoming many obstacles and hardships. No one achieves glory without believing in themselves and their abilities, or at least, that's what I think. Sometimes your path to making history doesn't quite go according to plan. My story is a great example. I'm Joanna. I'm 21 years old. I live with my parents and my little sister Veronica. My father was a police officer. He was very brave. He was my idol. He believed in justice and sacrificed anything to see it done. One of my life goals was to be like him. I loved to see him in his uniform. I viewed him as a hero of sorts and believed the old adage that good always triumphs over evil. Unfortunately, that rosy affirmation doesn't always hold true in real life. My father's work used to keep him terribly busy. Nevertheless, he took a few hours off on Veronica's birthday so he could be there with us. Halfway through the party, Dad's work called and told him that a thug was holding a group of nursery kids hostages, demanding a large sum of money and a means to escape the scene. Dad had to leave to deal with the situation, so he excused himself, telling us that duty calls. We were used to seeing Dad dash off suddenly at various times to deal with crimes in progress, but something felt uneasy about that particular time. Dad arrived at the scene just when his colleagues were preparing to charge into the building at significant risk to the kids. Dad volunteered to enter alone to take out the criminal before anyone got hurt. He sneaked into the building and engaged the hostage taker in a gunfight. He managed to kill the thug, but was seriously wounded. He died days later. The whole police department and the city were saddened by his loss. They held a memorial service for Dad. This senseless crime and the loss of my dad galvanized me to enroll in the police academy. Mom tried her best to dissuade me, but I refused to budge. I passed the entrance exam and worked my way through it. It was a challenging program that required diligence, persistence, and patience. The training was quite difficult at first, with very few breaks, and everyone else was intelligent and competitive. In fact, I began to doubt if I could keep up with them. But then I dreamed of Dad hugging me and telling me that I was his hero and that he would always be at my side. When I woke up the next morning, I felt somehow different, more confident, more resolved to succeed. I worked even harder, and my instructors noticed and acknowledged my extra effort. I made friends who soon gained confidence in my abilities. My grades improved considerably. Graduation day came, and I anxiously waited to see what my first assignment would be. I was ready to tackle crime, to fight for justice, for all. Unfortunately, my first assignment was as a traffic cop. I was disheartened to see my peers get more prestigious positions, even though I had higher grades than they did. Dejected, I went home and told my mom. She encouraged me and told me that everyone had a job to do and should do it to the best of their ability. Rewards would come in time. She said she appreciated the work of traffic cops, who kept city traffic flowing smoothly during accidents and other abnormal situations. Her words helped me to accept my situation. Regardless, the work was boring, and I still envied my peers for their more important and more glamorous assignments. Life's just not fair. But remember those dire situations I mentioned earlier? Well, during one of my traffic control days, when a traffic light had failed, I noticed two black cars idling in front of a bank in a no parking zone. Initially, I thought it was the bank manager or some other VIP stepping into the bank for a quick stop. I turned my attention back to my traffic control and waved the cars waiting in the left turn lane to proceed to turn left. Then, I looked back at the bank and noticed that a man had gotten out of one of the black cars and stepped over to speak with a bank guard, standing outside the bank. Suddenly, he struck the guard and knocked him unconscious. Then the cars emptied as a group of masked men exited and rushed into the bank. These actions all occurred in quick succession. An armed robbery was in progress. I called the police station on my radio and reported the incident. The police quickly showed up and took the waiting car drivers into custody. The masked men had no choice but to remain inside the bank, with the customers as hostages. They were trapped. They threatened that if they weren't let go free with the money, they would blow up the bank and kill all the hostages. My father's life and death scene played across my mind like a movie rerun. I watched the policemen discussing what to do. I felt that I knew more about these city blocks than they did, because I spent many hours every day plying these streets, directing traffic. So I volunteered to enter the bank alone. Since this was my beat, I knew that the bank had a secret entrance that the criminals couldn't have known anything about. Thanks to my police training, I was able to easily pick the lock on the secret door and sneak in through the back. I saw 2 hallways, one to the left and one to the right. I decided to take the one on the left. I expected that the right one would lead me to the lobby, where the criminals were holding the hostages. As I moved stealthily, I heard a noise and discovered that I had reached the lobby instead. There were 4 masked men watching the hostages, who had been tied up. Then, I spied a bomb in the midst of the hostages. These guys were definitely serious. One of the hostages spotted me, and I gestured to him not to speak or look at me. Unfortunately, one of the thugs had already noticed the hostage looking in my direction. He looked over and saw me. I fired and hit him in the shoulder. I knew the shot would cause the other policemen to rush in, so I needed to distract the masked man quickly. One criminal was holding a hostage in front of him, and he told me he would kill her if I didn't put my gun down. I lowered my gun to the floor, stood up, and raised my hands. All the masked men were watching me, with their backs to the main entrance. Just as I was about to get shot, the police squad rushed in and told them to freeze. The thugs surrendered. The hostages thanked me, and the police chief thanked me for risking my life for the hostages. The next day, the governor called me into his office and praised my bravery and dedication. He surprised me by transferring me from the traffic control division to the crime prevention division. I felt my father's spirit watching me at that moment and smiling with pride. My friends began calling me the Girl of Steel, and I was perfectly okay with that. Ever since I was a child, I adored horror movies. Scary stories, old legends and myths. While most kids were into singers and actors and movie posters, I loved vampires, the one-eyed cyclops, everything related to horror and gore. Monster movies, thrillers, the supernatural, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Because these things only happened in movies. Or so I thought. But what if they were to happen in real life? Let me tell you a story where something like this happened in real life. My name is Marlene, and I'm 15 years old. Like I said, unlike the other kids, I loved horror movies, zombies, vampires, and ghosts. The only one who shared my tastes was my brother Stan, an oddly stylish guy with a strange character. Nevertheless, I liked him. There are a lot of scary monsters, of course, but to me, the werewolf was the scariest of them all. A werewolf is an ordinary person who has been bitten by a werewolf, which in turn causes him to become one too. A werewolf looks like you and me, most of the time, but around the time of the full moon, that cursed person will transform into a monster with a taste, or should I say thirst, for human blood. My parents had gone to visit some relatives and stay with them for Christmas holidays, but I stayed home because I wanted to spend that time with my friends. Stan stayed home with me for similar reasons. One night, he came home looking tired, and his hand was bleeding. When I asked him what had happened, he said that some wild dog had attacked him and bit him. I was worried that it might get infected without Mom here to cleanse and bandage it, but he assured me that he was okay. I cleaned it the best I could and put a light bandage around it. The next day was a cold day, but we played outside and had fun together with our friends. At the end of the day, Stan said that he was feeling tired and went straight to his room without saying another word. When I went inside, I could hear him crying in his room, so I went in and asked him if he was okay. Again, he said that he was fine, but I was thinking that maybe the bite on his hand wasn't from a dog, but from some rabid animal. That would have been really bad. Or maybe from a werewolf. That would be even worse. I began to worry and started watching him more closely, just to make sure he was okay. I noticed that he began hiding his hand in his jacket pockets, wearing sunglasses at night, and was always tired. I could tell that something wasn't right. Then, one night, I heard strange sounds coming from his room, so I hurried to him. "Stan, please tell me what's going on. Tell me the truth. What is wrong with you?" I asked. And he said, "Really, I'm okay. I'm just hungry. Do we have any meat?" Meat, I thought, as in bloody meat. Suddenly my imagination started running wild, and I began thinking to myself, "Oh my God, what if Stan was bitten by a werewolf?" I checked the almanac and determined that the full moon was only 3 days away. I was scared out of my mind. What will happen if he changes when I'm here home alone? I felt like I was doomed to be killed by my own brother. I knew that the only way to kill a werewolf was with a silver bullet, or a silver dagger. But, one, where could I find one of those? And two, how could I kill my own brother? I must be losing my mind. My parents wouldn't be back for a week. Time passed, and the day of the full moon arrived. I knew I would have to face the person I loved the most in the world besides my parents, and either I would kill him, or he would kill me. It's a lose-lose situation. When my brother came home, he looked so strange. His eyes were darting around like a wolf, and he even smelled like one too. I pretended to be strong, but inside I was trembling, fearful of what this night might bring. I locked myself in my bedroom and waited for this night to pass quickly. I hoped. Then I heard Stan's door open, and I heard his light footsteps coming closer to my door. He knocked and asked if he could come in. Hesitantly, I opened the door. "Hi, Stan. Is there something you need?" I asked, and he said, "I'm so tired." Then I saw his skin turning a grayish color. He was clutching his stomach. The transformation was about to begin. He made a sound like a snarl. Saliva was drooling from his mouth. Fortunately, I was holding a silver kitchen knife. Thank God Mom had some real silverware. She had gotten out for the holiday dinner. I had gone by the church that day and asked the priest to bless a jar of water I brought with me, and I had dipped my silver knife in that blessed holy water just before I had opened the door to confront Stan. I was ready to pounce before he could. "Forgive me, dear brother," I said. Then I pulled the knife back and got ready to thrust it forward to stab him in the stomach. At that instant, Dad suddenly came in through the front door and saw us, saw me with a knife in my hand, ready to run Stan through with it. "Marlene, what are you doing?" he asked. Staring at the knife in my hand, I shouted, "Dad, run! Stan is changing into a werewolf!" Then Stan unexpectedly fell down unconscious, looking very much human. Dad ran over to him and felt his forehead. "He has a fever," he said. "Look at his hand, Dad. He's been bitten by a werewolf," I cried. Dad looked at me as if I was crazy and said, "Nonsense, Marlene. It's just a dog bite." We took Stan to a doctor, who examined him and took some blood samples. He did indeed have rabies, also known as hydrophobia, I learned. I laughed, but then I told myself that this wasn't really funny. I almost convinced myself that my brother was a werewolf. If Dad had come a few seconds later, Stan might very well be dead by now. I was seconds away from murdering my own brother due to a runaway imagination. It's been 2 weeks now, and Stan has finished the shot treatment. He's getting better quickly. What about me, you ask? Well, I've stopped watching horror movies forever. Well, at least till next month.